Hi, everyone. I hope everyone's good tonight. Please let me know that you're here and where you're from if you're on Facebook or YouTube. I'm always happy to hear from you. Welcome to Mrs. Q Live. I see some people on Zoom are having a little trouble connecting. Hi, Mr. Jensen. It's good to see you. Good to see you back. And we have a lot of people joining tonight on Zoom, on Facebook, and on YouTube. Hi to everyone. I see the McCabe's are here. Excellent. Mr. Davis is here. Happy to see everyone. Oh, Mrs. Healy. Ms. McGann, all the way from the Bronx. Oh, here's some people to admit on Zoom. Wow, it's great to see everybody tonight. I missed you all last week. For those of you who joined us last week, it was a really great time. Hello, Bernadette, Rhode Island. I'm glad to see all of the radical colonies checking in tonight. Excellent. Kentucky, wonderful. It's great to see you. I see a Texan up there on Zoom. And some people from New Jersey. I see a whole bunch of people. I even see a person on Zoom who was part of our reenactment last week, and a special thanks to Miss Brown for joining us last week. We had a great time. Those of you who were there, hi Ken, those of you who were there, it was a great time for everybody. I'm sure some of you have seen the pictures and video. Mrs. Healy says the photos were wonderful. Hello, Mrs. Q, to Miss Brown. And if you look on the YouTube channel, I posted a video late last night of some video highlights. I'll be posting some more video, but it went off far better than I think any of us expected. So we are planning to do another one soon. So we'll be commemorating a bunch of the events that occurred in New York in 1776 this year, because we just had a great time. We even had crowns that were, torn off of the fence. We made little crowns. We had a head of King George. And the highlight of the night, we paraded down the lower Broadway with the head of King George, shocking everyone who was sitting outside at the local taverns. It was really, really fun. And incredibly, the rain stopped just in time for us and then started up again after we finished. So we couldn't have been luckier or more fortunate than we were last week. So thank you for all of your support. Even those of you who couldn't be there, but still were supporting us in spirit. We know you were there. Thank you so much. So last week, before I even get to that, I always forget to do this. If you're enjoying my Mrs. Q Live, you can support my project on PayPal and Venmo. And actually that PayPal link up there is incorrect. I just used the wrong screen. For PayPal, it should simply be Patriot Tours. And on Venmo, it's Patriot Tours NYC. So, let me correct that. I'll even type a little message here in the chat so that it should be paypal.me/Patriot Tours. So just so that you all know, and I'll put that in the comments on Facebook and YouTube as well. Let me put it over here. And the Venmo is correct on there. Just to let you know. So if you'd like to support my Mrs. Q project, that's a great way to do it. Another great way to do it is to come to New York City and take a tour with me, Patriot Tours NYC. That's another great way to do it. I also would like to tell you that the next live event we're going to do, I'm working really hard on working out a way that I can sell streaming tickets as well. So those of you out there who are not coming to New York for any reason can still watch. You can buy a live ticket and watch the event streaming live. So we're working on the technology to do that too. So you can come in person or you can watch from home and have a great time with all of us. So it'll be lots of fun. So thank you for those of you who have supported me and for those of you who are going to start supporting me. So one of the things we talked about last week when I had an opportunity, oh, by the way, this is the outfit I wore last week. For those of you who didn't come and see it, it's a nice big full skirt and my new little chemise and everything. Very nice summery outfit, looks very nice on. So this is my new outfit that I've been working on. So one of the things I got to query General Washington about last week, and you know what, I really want to take this let me take this frame off of here because I don't want to use it anymore since it's not correct. Just give me a second here to find the background that I want. Backgrounds. And where am I? I am in the cellar. There we go. Much better. So they're back in the cellar. So one of the things I got to ask General Washington when I ran into him last Friday night was what he meant by his comment, his warning to his soldiers to avoid lewd women, that lewd women would all be their downfall, and that they ought to take care to avoid lewd women in the town. And let me say that in 1776 New York, there were lots of what we might call lewd women. Let's at first take just a look at what the city was like at that time. So at that time, the city was full of transient men, wasn't it? We had the most soldiers, well, at least for a time, at least up until Lexington and Concord for about 12 years, we had the highest concentration of single men in the form of British soldiers located in New York City. And we also had lots of men who worked on ships, and they were transient from port to port to port. So they would pick up a ship, say in Boston, take it to Rhode Island, spend a night or two in Rhode Island, take it to New York, spend a night or two, move on to Philadelphia. And a lot of men made their living traveling up and down the East Coast this way. So of course, they're single, unattached men as well. So when you find lots of single, unattached men, of course, you find lots of brothels. So New York was filled with brothels. And, oh, I have a note from someone, excuse me. Oh, I have Jeff from Austin, took my tour a couple of months ago. Thank you, Jeff. And the photos from last week were really fun. So anyway, so whenever you have a lot of transient single men, at least in the colonial period and probably today as well, you get lots of brothels. So New York had an immense number of brothels and gambling houses and things like that. Now, the thing that made New York unique is that those brothels and gambling houses all existed in kind of one stretch of land that went from Trinity Church to St. Paul's Chapel along the Hudson River, all on land owned by, you might already know, Trinity Church, which owned the whole west side of the island up to about where Greenwich Village is today. So all of those brothels and gambling houses, etc., were all on land owned by Trinity Church, known as the Holy Ground. So the Holy Ground owned the brothels, which were all paying rent to Trinity Church. So that made New York rather unique and maybe somewhat amusing in that respect, that the Church of England did make money off of the brothels and gambling houses. And General Washington had a bit to say about that last Friday, as we did have a loyalist in our group, and he reminded her that her church was making money off of the prostitutes in New York. Or as one gentleman from Boston said, look at New York, where even the church makes money from the whores. So that is kind of that whole west side stretch of the island along the Hudson is full of brothels and gambling houses. And oh, as long as we're talking about it, how about a picture of Trinity Church that made their money on those brothels? Let's find Trinity Church. I know I have them here for you tonight. There they are. So there they are, Trinity Church. So there's the church, the Church of England. So lots of fun there, right? So Trinity Church making its money on all of these brothels and gambling houses. Now, for those of you who watched the TV show Turn, you probably also saw the brothels that were down in the dock area on the other side of the island, on the East River side of the island. And of course, there were lots of brothels there because the boarding houses for sailors were there and the docks were right there where the guys were getting right off. So you would have found that. And still, one of the scenes that Mr. Q found shocking when he watched Turn, you might remember, was when Colonel Simcoe was just walking along where all the brothels were. They were all little tents, and he was just flipping up the opening of the tent and peeking in to see if the woman was busy. And if she was busy, he would just put the flat back down and go to the next tent. So Mr. Q was quite shocked by that, but that is pretty much what it was like down there in that dock area, so that East Side dock slum area. So we have lots of these, as they're called, lewd women walking around the town. And, you know, we can be really honest here and say that if you're not a woman who, you know, is somewhat educated or who has a skill of some kind or marries a gentleman, that is one of the few things open to you in order to support yourself. There are very few other ways for a woman to survive. Women are generally dependent on the good graces of the men in their family, and less like me, they come from an old Dutch or Spanish or non-English family that has allowed their daughters to inherit their businesses and properties. So as you know, my father was Italian, and I inherited my business from him. We also in colonial New York have many Dutch ladies who have inherited their fathers or family businesses as well. And some of those businesses have always, by the way, been run by the woman of the family. So unless you're in that position or you've married well, as my sister, Mrs. Van R, married very well, you may not have many opportunities open to you to support yourself. You might be able to work as a servant and live in a boarding house, or if you're talented and you can sew, you may do that and live in a boarding house. But for a lot of ladies, that this is their only opportunity. So the brothels are full of these ladies. Now, this was also very well known in European cities and in London too, right? So the proliferation of this lifestyle of brothels and gambling houses. And in mid-1700s England, there was a very famous painter named William Hogarth. And I have a picture of Mr. Hogarth here for you as well. It's a very nice picture of him with his doggie. Is that him? There he is. There's Mr. Hogarth with his dog. Mr. Hogarth was a very well-known painter in England and Europe, and he painted all kinds of things. He painted portraits, he painted, you know, historical subjects, he printed parodies of historical things, he printed parodies of politics and society. He printed one of my favorite cartoons of the great Whig leader John Wilkes, a really hilarious cartoon of John Wilkes. And he got famous for some series of paintings he did known as moralizing art. And these are paintings about morality, specifically warning against immoral behavior. And there are two excellent series he did. One is called The Harlot's Progress. That's the first one he did. And the second one is The Rake's Progress. And we're going to take a look at those tonight. Now, The Harlot's Progress was completed in 1731. The paintings in your time, unfortunately, no longer exist, but a series of engravings do exist. So I have shown some of these on my tour, and people are a little bit shocked at, let's say, the content of some of these paintings. So for you ladies out there, you might want to be sitting, or you might want to have like a drink. I have some champagne left over from last week here, so you might want to have a drink, maybe some port, just in case, maybe a fan, because some of these pictures are going to be very controversial. As a matter of fact, this is the reason we're in the cellar tonight, because Mr. Q did not want me to be discussing this in our home in case he had any guests. He did not want them to hear me talking about this. Now, as you can imagine, Mr. Q's male friends probably know more about this than I, being a lady, will ever know. So I think Mr. Q is just teasing me a little bit on this subject, portraying his own purity to be a little bit more than it might really be. So now let's start with the first engraving in The Harlot's Progress. Oh, that's not what I want. That's a filter. I don't want to put bunny ears on or anything like that. Do I? No, I don't think so. Helps if I choose the right thing. Okay, here we go. Number one, The Harlot's Progress. If some of you have taken my, if you took my Culper Spiring tour, you saw this on that tour. Oh, I have someone here, a Mr. Mateo, who says she saw The Rake's Progress. Oh my gosh, I'm so envious. I cannot wait to go back to England so I can see some of these things now that I know what they are. What a great thing to be able to see. So this is a number one in The Harlot's Progress. And I have some some notes here for myself because I don't recall the specific content of every one of these because we're going to be looking at so many of them tonight. So this is about a lady named Moll Hackabout. So she's the young woman you see in the picture right here who's arriving into London on a carriage. And I don't know if you can see, I don't know if I made it big enough, but she has a little pin cushion over here, a little pin cushion, and she also has scissors hanging from her belt. This indicates that she's a seamstress looking for work in London. And she, of course, is immediately greeted by a pox-covered madam from a brothel, right? So you can kind of see the black spots on the woman's face there, so showing she has the pox from syphilis. So she's greeting her right away. And in the doorway, you see two gentlemen in the doorway. The gentleman in front is a rake, as they would call him. A rake is a wealthy gentleman who has nothing else to do in life but spend all of his money on fashion, brothels, and gambling. So in the front is the rake. Behind him, kind of leaning behind him, is the man who is viewed as his pimp, or the man who is procuring women for him. They're walking out of the brothel, and you know, you can barely see it in this picture, but if you look there where his hand is, you can, do I dare say this? You can see that his hand is under his coat in his trousers, where he is, shall we say, fondling himself in anticipation. Ever see some people are making some really weird faces? Exactly. Where he is quite excited at the potential of a virgin. So I told, and they're going to get worse from here. This is just the first one. So ladies, I see somebody's fanning. I can see you might want to fan yourself here. So that's her first introduction to London. And as my 21st century version of Mr. Q said when he looked at this picture, it's just like the Port Authority in the 70s. With the guys grabbing the girls right off the bus. So he looked at that and he said, gee, things never change, do they? And I suppose he has a point. So there is picture number one in the harlot's progress. Now let's go to picture number two. I'm going to move this over here. Oh boy. Harlot 2, here we go. Picture number two. Well, now she's doing quite well for herself. You can see that she has spent some time in a brothel and she is now a kept lady herself. So she's in a very nice room here with some artwork on the wall. And no, I don't want to get too much into some of the imagery in here because some of it is really ethnically offensive. So I'm just going to kind of skip over what these pictures are for us tonight. If anybody's interested, I can send you the detailed description of what everything is in there. And she's now the mistress of a wealthy merchant. And you can see she has nice clothes. She has a little table of cosmetics over here. She has a little servant helping her get dressed. And things seem to be going along pretty nicely for her. She's in a nice room, nice curtains and everything, artwork on the wall. And she's doing quite well for herself. So she has kind of proceeded down this road. And at least for now, it's working out pretty well for her. So let's see what happens to her next. And let's see. Oops. There we go, Harlot 3. So now she's no longer in that nice environment anymore. Now it looks like she's more like a common prostitute, right? She's in her own room here, and it's really not all that nice. Up on the top up there is a wig box, and I had to look this up. On the wig box is the name James Dalton, who apparently was a famous highwayman in England, a famous criminal. So they're, suggesting that one of her customers is this famous criminal, this highwayman, James Dalton. And also there's a witch's hat on the wall, over here, signifying evil or her connection. Maybe she's a witch, the idea that this kind of behavior is essentially immoral and evil. So that's over there on the wall. Very hard to see. You really need to enlarge it. But over these two little pictures here, on top of those pictures are two little bottles, and those are apparently cures for the French disease. You all know what the French disease is. right? Or I guess the French might call it the English disease, might call it the Spanish disease, you know, whoever you don't like at the time, it's their disease. So that's over there. And she's sitting on her bed, and she also, let me see, has her breast exposed. Oh my. So she has her breast exposed, and she's showing off, apparently looking at a new watch that she has that someone gave to her. Now these guys coming in the door, this is a magistrate and bailiffs behind them. So they're coming in to arrest her. So now she's really in trouble, right? So she's now a common prostitute, and she has broken the law somehow, and they are coming in now to arrest her. So things are looking not so good for our heroine here, or our protagonist, or our victim. Maybe she's a victim. So let's look at the next one. Number 4, oh no, she's in prison now. She's in Bridewell Prison, the famous prison. And you can see a couple guys are behind her telling her to work harder. And what she's doing in that picture is she is beating hemp to make ropes for hanging. So she's actually helping to make the ropes that are being used to hang the prisoners. And you can see a couple other ladies down here. And you can't really see it in this picture that well, but she has the black marks of syphilis on her face now too. So she now has developed syphilis herself, or the French disease. Sorry, I didn't mean to say that if anyone's offended. Mr. Franklin is here. Mr. Franklin says, I must admit that I have had some experiences in your topic this evening. Mr. Franklin. I have been trying to get Mr. Franklin to join us next week, so hopefully he's going to join us next week, and he might want to speak more about his experiences next week. Mr. Franklin, well, I'm very glad to see you. In the next picture, you never know what's going to happen when you watch Mrs. Q, do you? I think this is 5, right? And the next picture, she is dying. She is still in prison, and this is her here, all wrapped up, right? She's all wrapped up, and she's dying. And while she's dying, everybody's rifling through her things to see if she has anything of value left, you know, that they can make off with. So, you know, no one cares. And there are 2 doctors here, and the 2 doctors are arguing over the best cure. I guess at that time, the 2 cures they're talking about are bleeding or cupping, which we know didn't work. They also took mercury and a number of other, you know, crazy things. I do have an ad from Mr. Rivington's New York Royal Gazette during the, you know, occupation of New York, where he has, I forgot his name, Dr. Somebody's Pills for Gentlemen, which treat the French disease, so that no one knows you're, you know, being treated for it, and that you can go in and buy these pills and they'll cure you. And of course, none of it worked, but you know, you can see ads for that in Mr. Rivington's newspaper. And then we're going to have the final one in the series, where she has died. And this is her coffin here. And you can see that people have their food and drinks on the top of her coffin. Only one person is crying, and it's this older lady here who apparently was supposed to be her first madam. Up here on the wall is that original hat that she was wearing, so making a connection back to her time when she was young and innocent. And someone's looking in the coffin. I cannot see it, but the description of this engraving says there's a sign on the coffin that says she was 23 when she died. So that's really not very old at all to have experienced all that. Now, another thing in this picture, I'm going to warn all the ladies about ahead of time, is we have the parson here, right? And he's spilling his drink in his lap with one hand. And if we follow his other hand under his hat, it's under the, you're already shaking your heads, it's under the lady's skirt. So there's the local parson, the local religious gentleman. So Mr. Hogarth is kind of telling us all about what was going on in London at that time and who was involved. So those make up the series called The Harlot's Progress. Much more well-known is The Rake's Progress. And those paintings, as Kathleen told us a few minutes ago, are still available to be seen in London. So let's start out with, oh, look at the parson. Somebody over here on YouTube is laughing about the parson. Okay. Some great comments coming up. Okay, so let's go to rake number 1. Here we go. So now, oh, excuse me. Let me grab a quick drink here. So a rake, as I mentioned, is a gentleman who has nothing better to do with his money than go to brothels, gambling houses, and spend his money, dress nicely, and be irresponsible. And you know, a really sad thing is that Mr. Alexander Hamilton's lifelong friend and old roommate from King's College, Colonel Robert Troup, said that Hamilton's oldest son, Philip, was a sad rake, which is kind of a very sad commentary on Hamilton's oldest son. And I think he's kind of hinting at the kind of behavior Philip was involved in that led him to the duel with George Eaker and his untimely death at 19 years old. So that was an interesting thing. Colonel Troup, by the way, was also friends with Colonel Burr, and he didn't have very nice things to say about Burr's daughter, Theodosia, either. So I guess he was an equal opportunity critic of his gentleman friend's fathering skills. I know that in the 21st century, you don't think people in my time were like that, but they were. You have an idea that everyone was very complimentary and polite, and that might have been true in society, but when we were all speaking casually to each other, we were quite open and candid about things. So this is rake number 1. And our protagonist's name is Tom. And you can see Tom is standing there and he's getting fitted for some new clothes. His miserly, stingy father, very wealthy, miserly, stingy father, has just died. And so now he's going to start to spend that money that he always felt should belong to him. So you can see he's immediately getting fitted for a new suit. Over here in the corner is his girlfriend, Sarah, who is expecting, and they are not married. And this is Sarah's mother over here, who is not happy because with his newfound wealth, Tom is no longer interested in his pregnant girlfriend, Sarah, and is shooing her out so that he can join society. So now she is going to have some big problems. So that's our rake there, getting ready to embark on a new life, spending his father's money. Number 2. Rake 2. Okay, now here he is, and you can see this is him with the little hat on, and he's surrounded by all of these guys trying to sell him their services. So we have a, pianist over here. We have somebody who's offering to teach him to fight, to fence. What else do we have? A dance instructor, the guy playing the harpsichord. I said piano, of course, that's a harpsichord. Who else is there? I have a whole list here. Oh, somebody trying to get him to join a fox hunting club, a potential bodyguard. And, so now that he has all his money, all these people are coming around who want him to spend his money on them. So you can see he's surrounded by, all of these people who you would see in society who kind of live off of the wealthy. So now he's surrounded by all these guys. So he's wearing some very nice clothes. He has some nice shoes now, so he's kind of making his way along. And the next one, number 3, happens to be my favorite one in the series. My ultimate favorite one, because here he is now in a brothel / gambling den. This one is titled The Orgy. And there is so much great stuff going on in this painting. So here's our guy, Tom, over here, right? He's half undressed. He's got a whole bunch of stuff on the ground here that he's bought during the night. And we have the lady here. She has the spots on her face. You can't see that too well, who's unbuttoning his shirt. He looks pretty drunk. And this whole big party going on here. And you can see that, somebody's stealing his watch. Oh, yeah, this woman is stealing his watch down here from his hand. And most of the ladies do have the black patches. And, those are those little black patches they would wear in different shapes. Some of them were made out of like squirrel fur or mouse fur. and they'd put them over the syphilis sores, and they were very popular, and they would wear them in shapes like hearts or stars or diamonds or circles. So you can see the ladies are wearing those. But the incredible thing I learned about this painting is the woman down here who is undressing. See, there's her outer gown. She's got on her inner gown. She's taking off her stockings, who is getting ready to do the infamous candle dance. And you can see over here, there's a woman carrying in a big, like a charger platter, the big serving platter. And she also has a candle. Ooh, over there, a candle, right? So this is so shocking. This is the dance. So the dancer will get up on the table, and she has on like some bit of her undergarments, to be alluring, and they're going to be loosened up and everything. And she's going to do this big dance around the table over this lit candle. And then she is going to extinguish the candle by squatting on it. So we're not going to talk about where the candle goes, but you can probably guess. I'm so glad I have on this heavy makeup so you can't see me blushing. I have on this heavy stage makeup. I might be blushing through it. But that is the dance that was done in the brothels, right? So they dance around the candle, and then she does her thing and she squats on it and puts it out. I don't know what happens to the candle after that. I didn't look any further. So that is kind of what's going on here. So this would be, the reason I like this one is that this one really is what's going on in the Holy Ground in New York City, in colonial New York City, in the places owned by the Church of England. So you can see why our Puritan friends in Boston were so horrified when they came to New York and saw that all of these places were paying rent to the Church of England. Now, General Washington tried to get these places shut down throughout the summer of 1776 because his soldiers were spending time in there. They were getting drunk. They were getting, their stuff stolen. They were losing all their money. And one morning they weren't able to man the cannon batteries because they were so drunk from being in the brothels the night before. And the Church of England simply refused to close them, no matter how many times Washington made the request, and thus his general orders to his men to avoid the lewd women of the town who would lead to their destruction and downfall. So since he can't get the places closed, he wants to keep his men out of there. Men would have relations with women who they knew had the disease. Was there any rudimentary prevention used? I don't think so, because I don't think they knew how to stop it, or, it seems really ridiculous to us today that, these people would do this, have intimate relations with people knowing they have something contagious like this. But I think that this disease was just so, what do I want to say, common to society at that time that it just was. And it just seems crazy to me, but it just seems like it was just such a regular part of society. I mean, the thing to do, as Hogarth is telling us, is to stay out of these places, right? Don't go in there, because as you can guess, our friend here is going to start going downhill really fast. So let's look at painting number 4 in the series. Rank 4. So here's our friend now. He's on the street in his little, chair, and he's just about to get arrested for not paying his debts. So he's just about almost caught by a bailiff as he's in his sedan chair. And notice there's a woman here who distracts them and saves him. And you know who that is? That's his original girlfriend that he left expecting, that he threw away, who was expecting, but she still came forward and distracted these guys long enough for him to get away, is the idea of what you're seeing here. So, she still cares about him and has rescued him in this picture. So he just barely gets away. And hi, Trisha from New York. Thanks for joining us tonight. So he barely gets away here. So you can see he's just kind of sliding by now for not paying his debts. And he inherited all this money from his father. He can't pay his debts. Why? Because he's spending it all in the gambling dens and the brothels. And that is the story of the rake who gets addicted to that lifestyle. And no matter what, he cannot pay his debts. So he needs to find a way to pay his debts. And what's the best way to pay your debts if you don't have any money? You guys know, marry somebody who's rich. And so here is picture number 6. Am I on the right one? Hold on, give me a second. 5. Sorry about that. Number 5. So here he is getting married. So he finds a rich old maid who wants a husband. Here she is. And she looks like, I don't know who this little one is, maybe the servant's son. And he's marrying her. And who's coming in the door in the background here but his old girlfriend, Sarah, and the child that they had together. So I guess they're going to join in the household. But he is already, looking out of the corner of his eye at the new maid over here. So he's simply going to take advantage of this older woman who has never been married, who really wants a husband and wants a husband who is out in society and who has connections, maybe can help her to come out in society and be more accepted and that sort of thing. Reminiscent, if you know the story, of elderly Aaron Burr and the widow Jumel in New York, although Aaron wasn't living this kind of lifestyle, he was just broke. And the widow Jumel wasn't, old and needy. She was not that old, but she was very rich, and she was looking for someone to help her as an entree into international society. And former Vice President Burr was exactly the guy to do that, and he needed money, so they got married. Oh, look at this. So Miss Kaler tells me, Mrs. Q, they didn't know they were stopping the diseases, but they did use the intestine of certain animals to stave off offspring there for not getting the diseases. So an early type of condom, I suppose. So they did. Mr. Q, excuse us, now I'm out of focus. Mr. Q declined to turn off his 21st century device. Excuse us. So they did have some concept, at least of contraception, and an early type of condom, which probably did help them stave off the French disease. Mr. Franklin says, on disease, as I've made mention in my popular autobiography, I managed to have fortunately dodged the musket ball. Well said, Mr. Franklin. Well said, sir. So here he is doing what you did when you needed money. You marry someone who has it. So here we are. So we're getting married. And so our next one, this is turning out to be a really fun night. Thank you guys for joining me and for participating in the discussion. Okay, so in the next one, where are we? Oh, he's gambling. He's in a room gambling. Here he is. He has his wig off. All these guys are gambling away, right? They're just, the whole rest of the world doesn't exist. They're all addicted to gambling. They're losing their money. They're there all night. And it's just a massive gambling house where he's spending his time now. Let's see. Mr. Jensen tells me in Lewis and Clark, they used a form of mercury to fight off the French disease. It was believed that mercury would work. But, mercury was also a poison. So there was another difficult side to that as well. So here he is just gambling his new wife's money away. And what's going to happen when he can't pay his debts again? I bet we can guess. He goes to jail. So here he is. He's in debtor's prison now. So here he is. He's in debtor's prison. And here's his wife and his girlfriend, and everybody's there, and nobody knows what to do now. He's in debtor's prison, and he looks a little out of it there, like maybe he's losing his mind. Oh, let's see. Kathy Kaler tells us, right, that they did use mercury, and she says the curse they had for the French disease was as bad as the disease itself. That's right. So they did try to do different things that didn't work. Right. She says that the French disease was as bad as the cure. So mercury was just as awful for you as you went crazy, just like you did if you had the French disease. So there really wasn't anything until antibiotics were developed. So here he is in jail, And everybody's there. I guess, you know, at that time, everybody went to visit in the jail. So the whole family's in there in the jail. And he looks like he's losing his mind. He kind of looks like he's a bit out of it here. Like he, you know, doesn't really know what to do. He's not quite sure where he is or what's going on around him. He's looking a little crazy. So you can guess where his next destination might be if he's getting a little crazy. His next destination will be the place called, the hospital called Bethlehem Hospital, better known as Bedlam. And here he is now. So now he's in Bedlam, as they call it. Here's his wife, and I guess this is his girlfriend and the baby. And what I thought was shocking about this picture, look at these very well-dressed ladies back here. I meant to say his girlfriend down here somewhere. Look at these well-dressed ladies back here. Apparently, this was a thing to do in London for the aristocrats to walk through Bedlam and be entertained by the crazy behavior of the people there. So this was pretty shocking to me, but I guess this was a London pastime for aristocrats to go to the jails and look at people in there and laugh at them, and to go to Bedlam and watch everybody in their, you know, sad behavior and laugh at them. So I suppose that was a regular kind of thing they did in Bedlam. And oh, this is his original girlfriend, Sarah, with him here. And he doesn't even know that she's really there anymore, right? So we're kind of getting to the end of Tom's story, I think. Is that it? I guess that's the last one. Oh, yep, the last one is him in Bedlam. So I guess we can assume that, you know, he loses his mind and he dies a pauper, and his second wife also dies a pauper as he has spent all of her money. So, you know, some warnings from the great painter William Hogarth, some moral warnings about how one should live a more upstanding life, because these are, you know, the potentially horrible things that befall you. There is, I think it's on Netflix, a really good series with the word Frankenstein in it, and it stars Sean Bean. So if anybody's got their IMDb search engine out, or you want to go into a search engine and type Sean Bean Frankenstein, it's a series on Netflix that I started watching just to pass the time, because it was period appropriate. You know, it takes place during this time. So I thought, oh, I'll watch it and see how it looks. It is fantastic. Sean Bean plays a detective who's trying to find out who is killing boys and sewing their body parts together to make one human. And in his travels, he goes to speak, of course, to Mary Shelley, because it's kind of based on her book. So he's wondering if she's come in contact with anyone nefarious who she thinks might be doing this. But his character in the show does have the French disease, and he is slowly losing his mind from it. And as time goes on, his hallucinations are actually becoming kind of precognitive and telling him, you know, what's going on. But it shows how he has this sore on his hand that will never go away. He keeps wearing a glove, and once in a while he doesn't have on the glove, and someone will point to the sore, because they you know, they know what the sore is. And he tries a number of different treatments for it, and nothing works. And in a really moving part of the series, it turns out that he has lost his wife and baby, because he passed on the disease to his unborn child, who then died, you know, shortly after birth. His wife, not knowing he had it to begin with, was so despondent that she drowned herself. So this is all the emotional baggage his character is carrying with him as he's trying to solve these murders. So if you can find it, it's pretty well done. He's a great actor, so he's really good in it. And the woman who plays Mary Shelley is really great. She's really difficult and, you know, really just difficult and nasty, and just looks down on him. And there's a great scene where they're all around either Shelley or Byron. I think they're around Byron, and he's dying. And, you know, he just hates all of them as all being hangers on and being around him because he's famous. And, you know, there's just some really, really good stuff in it. So if you have time to watch some of it, you can kind of see a character who has this disease and how it's progressing, and how he really, well, I'm not going to tell you whether or not he has a way out of it. The Frankenstein Chronicles. Thank you, Miss Brown. I knew I could count on you, of all people, to look it up. It is really, really good. And there's some really good villains in it. And it also really, you know, one of the other good things that's in this series, if you like period pieces, is it shows you how there are members of parliament who are wealthy and they represent these very poor districts, and they never even go to visit them. You know, they don't even care about the people that they represent. You know, they just want their seats in the parliament for the social status it gives them, so that they can, you know, go to parties and associate with people and maybe get invited to a palace somewhere, something like that. So it really shows that as well. And how when this detective shows up at home of a member of parliament, and he's not even a lord, he's just an MP, right? They still all look at him like, what are you doing in our house? You know, like they don't even want him in the house, just this lowly working class detective. So you really can get a taste of that class structure that's going on at that time, and the corruption and the way they cover up for each other when they do find out, of course, who the murderer is. So it's a pretty decent series. So I recommend it. So, and somebody, and Kathy also recommended a series called Bedlam, which I haven't seen. Maybe some of you have seen that. I haven't seen that. So I just want to thank all of you for joining me. And I want to thank those of you who came out last week because it was really great. I'm going to be releasing some more video. And as I said, I think our next commemoration is just starting to come together, will be the famous August 29th crossing of the East River that George Washington made in 1776, where he escaped General Howe's attack in Brooklyn and incredibly lived to fight another day. One of the most important retreats in military history. So I think we're going to get together and commemorate that in some way. And although I would love to do it late at night, we're not going to do it at night. We'll probably do it in an afternoon. But sometime that weekend of August 29th. So I'm just organizing that. And for those of you in the New York City area, please come in and watch us. You know, these are fully immersive. You get to talk to all of the people who are participating. It's not just kind of a tour where you stop and someone talks and you stop and someone talks. Everybody joins in the group and everybody just keeps talking as we keep walking along, and you're free to engage all of the people in the cast. And if you'll be watching, you know, live online, someone will be reading your messages so that your questions will get asked as well. So thank you all for joining me. And if Mr. Franklin is out there, sir, I would like you to get in touch with me about whether or not you can join us next Friday. I did, by the way, speak with Mr. Madison today, who has expressed an interest in joining us one evening as well. And I think Mr. Madison and I may very well talk about the meaning of the Bill of Rights, so that we can clear some of that up. Of course, Mr. Madison would know better than anyone else about the Bill of Rights. So thank you all for joining me. I'll see you next week. Have a wonderful week. And hopefully Mr. Franklin will join us. Have a great night, and thank you again.
Bye. Thank you, Mrs. Q.
Bye, everyone. Thanks for joining me. I'm so happy you're all back this week. Thank you.
Thank you, Karen.
Thank you. You're welcome.